Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures, and today we're going to be doing the highly awaited part 9 of our Jurassic World Evolution 2 Accurate Dinosaur mod collection. I know that's a bit of a mouthful, but that just means that we're taking a look at a bunch of different mods people have been making and compare them to their real-life fossil counterparts. And today, we've got a really cool assortment of animals, I believe. There's a couple like new remakes and things, or remasters, or remodels, but we've got a lot of really cool new species as well. Not replacements, there's still replacements at the moment, but a lot of very interesting species coming around, and I'm quite excited to show these off to you guys. So I'm going to be starting off with one of these remasters or remakes. We have got here the Edmontosaurus. This is the Edmontosaurus by Northfire, which it kind of calls the Cretaceous wildebeest. So look at this wonderful guy here. So let's get him in the light. Let him walk through here. Look at these wonderful guys. I love how the patterns came out. So this is got that guidelines off. So this is the Cretaceous wildebeest, you could say. This is very much based off E. enectens, which is the later and the larger species of Edmontosaurus, compared to E. regalis, which is the one that's very famous for that comb-like crest that we see in the Jurassic World Evolution 1. Though that one's like a really kind of a combination of the two species, but you can see the larger E. enectens, which lived with Tyrannosaurus rex, and it was a direct descendant, I believe, from E. regalis. And we can see a lot of the differences here is that it's got a much boxier face, as we can see here. I really like how he did the beak, because we have pretty good skin impressions from both species of Edmontosaurus, and it shows that they didn't really have the duck bills that we think of, but we know that the beaks of these hadrosaurs, especially Eonectens, had a very large and expansive beak of keratin that you can see here with the Rhamphorhyncha. So it's really been coolly shown off here. And then we can see some of the changes. Got a much more horse-like face, believe it or not. You can kind of see how that E. regalis look is different from this. There's a much wider face, just generally a much bigger animal. Eonectens was quite large. I believe the largest estimates have put them about 14 meters or so. So that's comparable to animals like Giganotosaurus, which they were clearly close related to, like their Asian relative. And then we can see this wonderful... I'm a really big fan of how this came out. I really like how this fold of skin comes out down here, almost like a dewlap. Really awesome. The body's kind of been flattened. Well, not flattened, but the back's been flattened a little bit. Like, well, a really cool thing that they're comparing from regalis to enectens is that we know that regalis had almost these, like, tab scales, or like big lumps with, like, lots of big scales on them going down the neck. But it seems like Eonectens didn't really have this, was a bit more smooth, but it also had kind of like little spikes going down the back as well. Really interesting contrast between the two species. Then we can see the body is changed a little bit leaner and meaner, looks a little bit bigger and bulkier, because these guys are still quite large. Very Shitungosaurus-like, even though since they're close relatives. And then we can see this elongated tail. And the big specimen, I believe, Y-Rex is its name, is believed to be about 14 or 15 meters long. So that's bigger than T-Rex. So next time you think these guys were just snacks for T-Rex, they most definitely were not. They were quite big animals when they reached adult size, and they could be very dangerous just by virtue of their size. They were one of the largest basically one of the largest non-sauropod dinosaurs. So anything bigger would have to be a sauropod. So, yeah. And I'm really a big fan of how this came out. The only real major thing is, this is quite recent, but we know that hadrosaurs kind of had these ungulate-like hooves. They had, like, 2 nails here. It was really interesting. This comes from an E. enectens specimen. and it's pretty well mummified, so that really gives us a good idea into the soft tissue, which wasn't really shown off here, but I think it still looks really, really nice overall regardless. So really, really wonderful animal here. So this was done by Northfire, as I mentioned, and we're going to let these guys walk off and do their thing. And we're going to move on to the next animal. So this one's another Hadrosaur, but make sure they walk off. This one's another Hadrosaur done by Sweetener in her own little pack. Oh, their own little pack. And it's Amurosaurus. It's a very interesting animal. Let's release it. So let's get one that's stopped and not running around. I'm really big fan of the color on that one. I think we'll wait until he gets into the trees, or something. We'll go with this green one. Why not? So let's have a look at this wonderful one here. Have a look at him calling. So this is Amurosaurus, which means the Amur lizard. This is a genus of Lambeosaurian hadrosaurs, so it is related to animals such as Lambeosaurus and Parasaurolophus. It's found from the latest Cretaceous, about 68 to 66 million years ago. So that would be about the Maastrichtian age. So about the same time you have the famous animals in North America like Triceratops and Tyrannosaurus rex. And this guy was not found in America, it was found in Eastern Asia, as the name suggests, the Amurosaurus. And like other hadrosaurs and lambeosaurs, this guy would have been a pretty big bipedal herbivore with this kind of quote-unquote duck-bill snout that you can see here. And a hollow crest on the top of its head that could have been used for display and stuff like that. Though the fossils of the crest on Amurosaurus has not been found, so that's entirely speculative. And fossil bones of adults are rare, because most of the ones we have are mostly from juveniles. But it's estimated that the adults may have been about 6 meters long, or about 20 feet long. Though some estimates have made them even larger, about 8 meters and about 3 tons, or 3,000 kilograms. So this guy was discovered by Russian paleontologists, Sergei Kurzov and Yuri Bolotsky, so the very Russian-sounding names, of course, and was first described in 1991. And the name comes from the Amur River, which is basically at the border between the far east of Russia and China, and is named after that around that river, or that area. It was kind of found around that time. And the one species known, Amurosaurus surabati, was named after the late Russian paleontologist Anatoly Rybatin, who conducted these first Russian expeditions to find these dinosaurs. So it's very interesting. So all fossils have been recovered from this one bone bed, and it's suggested that this obviously came from the late Maastrichtian, so this would be from the Cretaceous period, so right at the time at the end of dinosaurs. And most of these specimens found are kind of disarticulated or juvenile, so we don't really have a good idea of... We have a pretty complete idea of what they look like, and there's lots of different skeletons, but they come from many different individuals, so we kind of don't really know what it looks like. But the holotype with the original specimen is just a maxilla and dentary, but there have been bones of other individuals that kind of give us a more complete picture of the animal, which is really cool. So this guy is also quite late. So it seems like it's potentially that there's kind of left two hypotheses. So it seems like all the basal hadrosaurians come from Asia, which has kind of led to the hypothesis that these lambeosaurians originated from Asia and then dispersed through the Bering Strait into North America. But there's also kind of two derived groups, the Paralophosanes and the Lambeosaurians. That includes animals like before, Parasaurolophus and Tyrannosaurus. And then Lambeosaurians include Coryphosaurus and Lambeosaurus, kind of evolved later. And there's potential that this guy's kind of descended from that later group, or potentially a little bit more related to animals such as Magnopolia and Valleyfrons. So it's very possible that these guys could have migrated back that way. So I think that's very interesting to talk about how that comes out in evolution, because they could potentially be quite basal or they could be quite derived. So that means there could be either one migration or multiple migrations back and forth, which seems to be the case in some other species. So it's not unheard of. But yes, Sweeney did a really, really wonderful job with these animals. I'm a big fan of Amurosaurus. Really cool guy here. Another cool hadrosaur. So let's let these guys do their thing. So now we've got a Russian dinosaur, and next we're moving on to take a little break from dinosaurs. We're going to be moving on to some pterosaurs. We've got one pterosaur today. Very, very interesting guy. Tupandactylus. I know we've covered him a few times, but this is the other species. This is Tupandactylus navigans, which is a really, really cool animal that we get to talk to once we release it. So we can see here, this is Tupandactylus navigans. And what really draws your attention is that this really, really weird crest. And as well, it's just such a beautiful specimen. So there was, in 2021, just last year, there was a study that described this very, very complete Tupandactylus navigans. And it's really, really awesome. That shows that these two species kind of look very different. You could see Tupandactylus imperator, which is the one that you kind of see as Tapejarus with the big, tall crest that kind of goes like that. This guy's got much taller and pointing forward almost. And we know that from a very, very well-preserved specimen that has even the soft tissue preserved. So we know that the crest was shaped like this pretty confidently, and also have a lot of other bones that go with it. So it is quite well known. And a lot of this was held together by keratin and these kind of collagen struts that kind of held it together to keep that shape. And I really like how brightly colored Sweetener made it. Really came out really well. But there's also another hypothesis that suggests that this could be sexual dimorphism, as in the male and the females would look quite different, as in potentially the males could have the much larger crest and the females this crest. But there is no evidence really to there is some thoughts. I wouldn't say there's no evidence, but it's really hard to prove sexual dimorphism in extinct species without lots and lots of specimens. So I think it's very, very difficult to try and explain that. But the main difference really is that these guys were also a little smaller, and also navigans may have been potentially quite a terrestrial forager, and it seems like these guys were capable of flight, but they spend much more time on the ground, as they were specialized for kind of walking around. Though they were not usually adapted to the kind of terrestrial lifestyle that astarids, so things like Quetzalcoatlus, may have had. They may have been more foragers, or not necessarily like a stork. They could have been different ecology, almost like a turkey potentially, or galliform, something like that. So potentially they could have had going down grazing. So it's pretty interesting what to think that they could be doing, eating a lot of nuts. This has been suggested for it and its relatives. And this guy, I believe, is from South America, from the Cretaceous, early Cretaceous. The other species found about 112 million years ago. That's for the holotype of T. imperator, but I believe these guys come from a similar place, similar time. But yeah, I think Sweetener did a really great job on this one. And look, it's almost see the cool textures on it. Too bad it doesn't have feathers, but we all know what that's like with Jurassic World. But yeah, I'm really a big fan of how this came out. I love this bright crest here. Let's see it on different ones here. I really like how it came out. I love this pattern. Really, really cool. Oh, this one looks nice. I love that. Sweeney did a really great job with these, and really shows off the two different species of. It'd be cool to have these as their own species. So you could have Imperator with the big crest, the big wide one that everyone loves, and then you have also navigans, which is newer, but it's also got this really, really funky crest going on. So I'm a big fan. So now we'll let them go off and do their own thing, and we're moving on back to the dinosaurs. And we got another Sweetener animal here. I believe this will be the last one before we go into the aquatics. So we've got here, this is based on the Sauropelta, but this is Hylaeosaurus, which is a very, very interesting dinosaur steeped in history. So let's get onto this one. So it's a very interesting animal here. Let's get you look at this wonderful guy. So this is Hylaeosaurus, I believe you pronounce that, which means belonging to the forest lizard. Very long name. But these guys were an ankylosaurian dinosaur that lived 136 million years ago during the early Cretaceous of England. And to go into its history, was actually one of the first dinosaurs discovered, like in the same kind of league as Iguanodon and Megalosaurus. And it was described in 1832 by Gideon Mantell, who was considered one of the earliest and founding paleontologists. And in 1842, this was one of the 3 dinosaurs that Richard Owen based Dinosauria on. And there were 4 species to this genus, but only the type species Hylaeosaurus intimus remains and is considered valid. And these guys have only been found from limited remains, and much of its anatomy is unknown. But it is often considered to be a basal nodosaur, though more recent cladistic analysis recovered it as a basal ankylosaurid. So that's very interesting. And in terms of its size, it's about 5 meters long or so kind of on the larger side. And you can see it has these quite large 3 long spikes on the shoulder. So I think that's really interesting just to talk about that history. It was one of the first animals, if you know the Crystal Park animals, there was a model of it, and it didn't look anything like the animal was now. It was just a giant iguana with spikes down its back. So you can see how much our understanding has changed of dinosaurs from the early 18th century. So I think that's very interesting. And in terms of its size, it was originally estimated to be about 7 meters long by Gideon Mantell, and about half the size of the original 2 dinosaurs of Iguanodon and Megalosaurus. But by that time, it was obviously just meant to be a giant iguana, so we kind of don't really know what it looked like. But more modern estimates with much better understanding of its anatomy estimated to be about 6 meters long, or about 20 feet, and some people even made it a little bit smaller at about 3 to 4 meters, but the weight is generally about a couple tons, or 1 to 2 tons. Though many other details of its anatomy is unknown, we know we had I mentioned these 3 big spikes that kind of stick out from its shoulder that could have helped with defense or potentially sexual display and like fight each other like antlers. And it seems they weren't too different from other species of nodosaurs or early ankylosaurs. They weren't too different. And there was actually some traits on the shoulder blade. You could see the sharp angle of 120 degrees between some of the bones that kind of showed that it was pretty different. And in terms of its phylogeny, it's often been recovered as an early nodosaur related to things like Mimura pelta. But as I mentioned later, it seems that they could be potentially an early ankylosaurid. Or sometimes even, more recently, there's been kind of a big re-evaluation within Thyreophora, which is the group of dinosaurs that includes ankylosaurs and stegosaurs, that it may actually be its own group, the Polycantheridae. So that's a group of animals that includes obviously Polycanthus and animals related to that. So I think that's very interesting. Dinosaur taxonomy is always very interesting. But I'm a really big fan of how this guy came out. Sweetener's really pulling out some cool animals. What I like about this choice is that even though it's the kind of the most unassuming choice, it doesn't look too different from Sauropelta, it isn't quite as impressive. But it's just so steeped in history. This was one of the first dinosaurs found, and it's kind of that same league as Iguanodon and Megalosaurus. And it's changed so much with our understanding of dinosaurs over the past couple hundred years. And remember, these guys used to be just thought of as giant iguanas. So I think that's just so cool, and came out really well. So Sweetener done a really wonderful job with these guys. And we'll let these guys walk off and do their thing before we get onto the new animal. So next up, we got a really cool guy based on the Minmi. And this is not a dinosaur, but a synapsid. And once I mention that, you probably guess what it is. But this is a really early little guy. Came out really well. We have got Lystrosaurus. Let's find ourselves one that's walking about. There we are. Look at this little man. We'll have a look at this guy. Gosh, I love this model. This came out super well. Oh, I think we'll pick this guy. Or this guy. I like this guy. We'll have a look at him. So this is our wonderful Lystrosaurus. So Lystrosaurus, which means shovel lizard, is an extinct genus of Dictodont. So this is a group of synapsids that you'd recognize from animals like Placerius and larger animals like Liguacia. So these really large herbivores that live through the Permian and into the Jurassic. So this guy was from about the late Permian to the early Jurassic, so about 250 million years ago to the end of the Jurassic, where it ended with animals like Liguacia, like elephant-sized Dictodonts. And they lived pretty much all over the world. They have been found in Antarctica, India, China, Mongolia, European Russia, and South Africa. And that is because at the time, the world was in one supercontinent called Pangaea, where animals could basically walk all over the planet. They could walk from Antarctica to North America to Russia. In China, there was no problem for them as long as they had the effort and the will. They could have walked there. So there was really not that many boundaries for them. And there's about 4 different species recognized, so it was thought to be much higher, and is most likely going to be lumped down even more. And they ranged in size from about a small dog, and the largest species here, I believe this would probably represent the largest species, about 2.5 meters long. And as you can see, as a Diectodont, they have these only 2 teeth, these really 2 big tusks, like these tusk-like canines, and these horny beaks, or they've been used for biting off pieces of vegetation, so they were herbivores, very similar to like a turtle. And you can see they're quite heavily built, approximately about pig-sized. But you can see they didn't really have that mammal-like gait. They seem to have walked like more semi-sprawling like that. So I think that's very, very interesting that they'd made them more upright, probably just to fit on the Minmi. And the forelimbs were actually quite robust, even more robust than the hind limbs, and suggests that these guys would have been quite powerful burrowers. And Lystrosaurus, as I mentioned, was quite big, and they have a very, very interesting history as well. By the time the big dying happened, the Great Dying, at the end of the Paleozoic, or the Permian, that caused like 95% of all life to go extinct at the time, and kind of set the stage for the Mesozoic. These were the not the dinosaurs, these were the animals that kind of really came out there, out of that, pretty much unscathed almost. And in some areas of the world, we have rocks and fossils from right after the Great Dying. Almost like 99% of the fossils are from Lystrosaurus. And it seems like these guys almost grew in spades, like they just took over after the extinction. And that could be obviously fossil bias as well, but these guys just seem to do really, really well after the extinction in some areas. And after that, as more species kind of evolved after the extinction, as the world recovered, these guys potentially went extinct. And especially around the middle Jurassic, I believe. And some of the reasons it's believed that they could have survived is because they could have gone into hibernation or torpor, as evidenced by growth marks in their tusks. It's also potentially possible that they could have dug into the ground, as I mentioned, so they would have been able to dig in the ground and shelter from a lot of the big effects. There's also been suggested they could have been semi-aquatic, though that's kind of... And they just seem to just, for whatever reason, they just did really, really well. There's some factors, as mentioned, like going into torpor, and also being able to dig really could have helped them. And this could be also with other Diectodonts, really, really helped them radiate into the Jurassic. And the Jurassic is such a weird time in the history. Really, really awesome group of animals live in the Jurassic. And these guys kind of did well. They lived in all through the Jurassic as well and became animals, as I mentioned, Placerius, other Diectodonts, and Liguacia, until they became extinct in the Jurassic with the rise of dinosaurs, like particularly sauropods that could have been competing with them, like early prosauropods such as Plateosaurus and Mesospondylus, animals like that. But yeah, really, really cute little animal with really great history, and I can't believe how well this model came out. And the skins just fit so perfectly. I'm such a big fan of this. Really, really awesome. Jasurbia, you deserve a clap, and you did a wonderful job. I'm going to give you a clap. I love these guys. Really cool talk talk about these animals. Big fan of Dictodonts. So let's let these guys move on before we move on to the next animal. Really fit well on the Minmi. So let these guys go off and do their own thing. And now we've got from Megagamingrex Gaming. You guys will recognize him from a lot of Zoo Tycoon, not Zoo Tycoon, Planet Zoo mods. So this is his paleo-edit of Giganotosaurus. Oh. So let's see if we can get a good one of him in the light. There we are. Let's see. Look at this poor little Lystrosaurus. We'll get one of them roaring. Yeah, why not? That's a cool shot. So we can see this is one that seems to be much based on the Frenois skeletal, which is pretty spot on. So we can see a lot of the changes are mainly in the skull here. It's almost, instead of that really long, outdated kind of skull that's from like early 90s reconstructions of Giganotosaurus, this one's a little bit more flattened and shortened. Still quite bulky though and lean. Nothing comparable to like a Tyrannosaur, which has these large jaws to like crush things. These guys were much more for shearing, though they could deliver a pretty nasty bite as well. It's estimated that all of these large Giganotosaurus could give a bite force of about 2 tons, so that's still very, very big, but nothing compared to animals like Tyrannosaurus, of course. But look at these wonderful big guys here. You've got some lips as well, and really wonderful, and added this really charismatic looking crest, or characteristic crest, I should probably say. I think it really came out well, especially works with the patterns there. As you can see, the purple kind of shows up on that. I really like how the spikes that goes down. There seem to be too many other edits. I think, see the arms are right, no more pronated hands. Could be probably made a little bigger. And then we can see the wonderful legs and all that, the pubic boot and all that. And I think the tail's been elongated a little bit. Mainly the changes just around the skull. But I'm a really big fan of how this came out. Giganotosaurus is obviously a very, very cool dinosaur. A lot of people love the big theropod, and it is coming in Dominion, which is also very cool to see. Though I'm not very excited for that movie, but still really cool to see more dinosaurs get into the public eye. So yeah, really, really cool dinosaur. Let's have a spin around and have a look at the frame. So you can see, you can obviously see the change in the skull. It's probably a lot more obvious here. Downturned. These big lips. Megagamingrex Gaming has done a very good job, especially getting that skull right. Really does look like the Frenois skeletal, which is pretty spot on to what we expect Giganotosaurus to look like. Did a really wonderful job. Big fan indeed. So hopefully these I don't get any ideas with poor little Lystrosaurus. Okay, so now we're going to move it on to the aquatic animals. So that's going to be very, very awesome. So now we're going back to Sweetener, and she picked not she. I keep saying she. It's just because their profile picture's a woman, but it's he. But whatever. We have got Pistosaurus, which is a very, very interesting little guy. Not even a plesiosaur, as I'll get into. So let's them swim out there. So I want to get a good picture of these guys. So let's have a look at this guy. Look how weird he looks. Such a goofy fellow. So we'll get into these guys. Just get out of here. So look at that weird face. So Pistosaurus, which means credible lizard, is an extinct Sarcopterygian reptile. So this is the group that includes animals such as plesiosaurs and ichthyosaurs, and this guy is closely related to the plesiosaurs. the fossils of these guys have been found around Germany and France, and date to the Middle Jurassic, so a little bit after Lystrosaurus's time, and is kind of a single species. His name is Pistosaurus longevis, and is considered the oldest subaquatic flying reptile. So what they mean by that is the first reptile to kind of use that flippers like the plesiosaurs would. So really, really cool. And it's got a very, very distinct skull, even though it does resemble that of other Psychopterygians. They actually have this quite long, slender snout, as you can see here, and they have these extended nares that come down the snout. And it seems that these guys were more closely related to plesiosaurs than animals like Nothosaurus, so kind of that grade. And is often mistaken for a plesiosaur or a Nothosaur. And Dinosaurs were a clade that lived in the Middle Jurassic, and these guys are considered a stem group Plesiosauria, so these were more closely related to plesiosaurs that would come later, so like Elasmosaurus, Plesiosaurus, animals like that. But this guy belongs to its own clade, Pistosaurida, from the Jurassic. So these guys weren't particularly huge. They were comparable to Plesiosaurus itself, about 3 meters long. Can't look how goofy this guy looks. And they have a body that resembles that of a Nothosaur, and they lived through the Jurassic, as I mentioned, Middle Jurassic. And they had, like the plesiosaurs, these paddle-like flippers that they used to swim. And they have this very, very interesting skull. And it almost looks like, it almost reminds me of something like a beaked whale or something like that. Potentially, they could have been eating like soft-shell prey. But I don't think there's been really too much to look into that. Very, very interesting animal here. And in terms of, as I mentioned, how it's related to, it's kind of considered its own little group, a very basal group to the plesiosaurs. Really interesting little guy. And in terms of its information of how it lived, it seems that these guys may have actually had many different ways to kind of avoid getting, to counteract the positive buoyancy of the air in their lungs. And so the ultimate goal was that, is obviously to help them dive deeper. It seems that these guys had calcified cartilage incorporated into their bones, so this would have made them denser and allowed them to dive better, so that's also very interesting. In terms of their history, there are non-plesiosaurian Psychopterygians that have been found in areas like China, Europe, America, Israel, and Tunisia. And although they seem to be closely related, Pistosaurus is only found in Germany, or Germanic areas, such as France and Germany, as I mentioned. And the early discovery from these guys have really just kind of really muddled the waters, and it's really, really cool. I'm a big fan of this Pistosaurus. I actually never heard of this guy before seeing this, but yeah, really, really interesting animal. Almost, it just screams like a... I know I'm obviously not a paleontologist or anything, but it screams like a squid eater or just something specialized, almost like a beaked whale type thing. I really just love it. It's really, really distinct and interesting. Sweeney did an amazing job with this guy. I'm a big fan. So let's watch these guys swim off. So we're going to be looking at one of this guy's very, very late and large relatives. This was done by Megagamingrex, once again. We have got Albertonectes. Let's see if we can get one paused. Let's have a look at you. Now, we'll wait until you get a better position. Come on, dive a little bit for me. So look at this wonderful guy here. So this is Albertonectes, as I mentioned. So this guy is a close relative of Elasmosaurus and is an elasmosaurid plesiosaur. This guy also comes from the late Cretaceous, so about the Campanian, or the Middle Upper Campanian, from the Bear Paw Formation in Alberta, Canada, as you kind of guess from his name, Alberta. It contains the single species Albertonectes vandervelli, and it's considered the longest Elasmosaur, and more generally Plesiosaur, in both its neck and its total body length. And it's known from one specimen that has 132 vertebrae, from the atlas to axial complex and the fused tip of the tail vertebrae, so 132 vertebrae, and it's generally pretty well preserved. It also has complete forelimbs, hindlimbs, gastralium or belly ribs. It also seems to actually have a belly full of ammonites and gastroliths in its belly, which would have been used both for ballast and potentially to digest its prey. So very interesting animal here. And it's found in the Bear Paw Formation, as I mentioned, in southern Canada. Southern Alberta, which is in Canada. And it's believed to be no younger than 73.5 million years old. So it's approximately from the Lake Campanian, or the Upper Campanian of the Late Cretaceous. So right at that end, 70 to 75 million years ago, around that area. And it also is the longest known elasmosaur in both neck and total body length. So the body length of this guy would have been about 11 meters in post-cranial body length. So from the tip of its snout to the tip of its tail would have been about 11 meters. And in terms of its neck, it would have been about 7 meters. So quite a long animal. So as I mentioned, yeah, quite a long neck. And in terms of its ecology, it would have been similar to other Elasmosaurus. It's believed that they would have eaten pretty much anything they could get their mouths around. A lot of people think they would be like specialized fish eaters, but it turns out they would be eating pretty much just about anything. But it seems they would have used their long necks for whatever reason to try and sneak up on prey and whatever. So I think that's really cool, interesting ecology that we don't really have a modern comparison to. I really love how this guy came out. Not too dissimilar from Elasmosaurus, but we can see the difference here. Really big fan of how that skull came out, and you can see the cool fluke at the back there. The only real big inaccuracy I can see is it doesn't really have that smooth skin that we know from Elasmosaurs. And in terms of how it's related, it's closely related to animals such as Styxosaurus, or Tapejarus, or Mauisaurus, so those kind of groups of mid or later Elasmosauridae. So as I mentioned, related to those kind of animals. Really cool guy as well. I'm a big fan. So Megagamingrex, I'm really glad you gave this guy to us, but you're only penultimate for today because we've got a really cool animal I want to show off or have a look at, and I'm just a big fan of how this one came out. Leviathan, you really knocked it out of the park with this one. We have got Deinosuchus, everyone's favorite big bad prehistoric crocodilian. So that is a perfect image. Look at how beautiful that looks. Now this is based off the alligator from Planet Zoo, but look how beautiful that came out. Magical, absolutely beautiful. Let's see. Oh, I love this one. Look at the beautiful colors on this guy. We'll have a look at this one. I'm a big fan, a really big fan. How beautiful. So this is Deinosuchus, which means terrible crocodile. Very awesome name. Is a extinct genus of alligatoroid crocodile, not allisauroid. So this is a group that's related to modern alligators and caiman. They lived about 82 to 73 million years ago in the late Cretaceous period. So about the same time as Albertonectes, around that Campanian age. And its name, as I mentioned, terrible crocodile, was first remains discovered in North Carolina, or United States, in the 1850s, and the genus was described in 1909. And knowledge at first was pretty incomplete, but better materials over the years have kind of given us a really good understanding of this predator. And although Deinosuchus was much larger than any other modern crocodile or alligator, it isn't believed to be the largest. And in terms of its size, though, it's about 10 meters long, or potentially even longer, like 11 to 12 meters by some estimates. And it's believed it's not being too dissimilar from its modern relatives. It has this large, robust head. It's not quite round like a alligator, but you can see it's almost like a hybrid. It's quite wide for a crocodilian, but it's almost like a hybrid between a crocodile and an alligator. Really, really interesting. And they also have these thick osteoderms down the back. They would have been both for protection and thermoregulation. And in terms of their growth rate, it's been estimated that these guys could have lived for up to 50 years, but growing at a rate similar to modern crocodilians, but they just kind of maintain that growth over a longer period of time. So they just kind of didn't stop slowing down growing. And in terms of their fossils, they've been described from 10 US states. That includes Texas, Montana, and many along the east coast. And fossils have been also found in northern Mexico, and it's believed these guys lived on both sides of the Western Interior Seaway, which was a large seaway which went down through the middle of America, or North America at the time. So it kind of went right through down from Canada, right in the middle, through the middle states of the US, and emptied out into the Gulf of Mexico, where this guy was an opportunistic apex predator around these coastal regions, or potentially even more inland. These guys would have pretty much eaten whatever they could. Pretty much dinosaurs, large turtles, large marine reptiles, anything that they could get their mouths around, just like modern crocodiles, would have been excellent prey. And there's believed to be a few different species of these guys. This one is based on hatchery, but there's also Deinosuchus rugosus and Rhinogrenensis, and there was one just described a couple years ago, Sremoni, so very, very interesting. And these guys are believed to have such powerful bite forces. It's believed that the bite of Deinosuchus would have been about 18,000 newtons, and it's argued to be even the largest dinosaurs, such as Tyrannosaurus, had bite forces that were nowhere near as powerful as that of Deinosuchus. And in terms of its habitat, as I mentioned, would have been living in these swamp areas on both sides, and potentially seafaring in the Western Interior Seaway. So it's very similar to something like a saltwater crocodile. Very interesting. But yeah, just such awesome animals. We have to watch this guy swim for a little bit. I'll have to go back here and kind of let it play. I'm really a big fan of this pattern came out. I think it's cool that it isn't just green. It's like, because caimans have quite a lot of colors to them, so it's cool to see that represented with the color system. Look at this wonderful one here. Really big fan of that. Where's the other one? There's supposed to be 3, I think. Here's the other one, I think. Wonderful. Absolutely beautiful. Look at that. This has to be one of my favorite mods that have come out for Jurassic World Evolution 2, I'll be honest. I'm a big fan. A huge fan. So yeah, I think we have enough looking at Deinosuchus, a wonderful, terrible crocodile. The only cool thing that would be cool to see it, I think it's based on the Tylosaurus, so it can't jump out and eat the shark, but still really, really awesome regardless. We've got to watch this guy for a little bit. I love this reddish color on him. It really came out well. So, yeah. I think this would be a good place to... Wait, is he going to go? No, I don't think so. But we will move on. So, anyway, I really, really, really hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember, hit the little bell icon to get notified about anything. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.